Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Islamic History Podcast. I'm your host, Muttaqi Ismail. This season, we're discussing the history of the Mughal Empire. This is episode 8-16, Akbar and Religion. This will be the final episode of this season. Before we get into this episode, let's do a brief recap of where we are so far. Akbar becomes the Mughal Emperor in 1556 when his father dies. By 1570, Akbar has neutralized most of his Rajput enemies through either marriage or warfare. Akbar is heavily influenced by Sufism, making annual trips to the tomb of a Sufi mystic. He is also successful in his conquest of Gujarat in 1573 and Bengal in 1576. And with that, let's discuss Akbar's strange take on religion. Din-i-Ilahi. Akbar was always interested in religion and was a practicing Sunni Muslim until 1578. He built a place called the Ibadat Khana in Fatehpur Sikri, which was a meeting house where he would discuss religion with Islamic scholars. These meetings usually happened on Thursday evenings after Salatul Maghrib or the sunset prayer. Akbar would often invite Muslim scholars from different schools of thought, perhaps because he wanted to gain a deeper understanding of Islam, or perhaps he wanted to reconcile doctrinal differences. He even encouraged the different scholars to debate each other, but these debates sometimes got heated and the scholars would end up shouting and calling each other names, which Akbar didn't like. In 1579, he passed a decree called the Mazhar, which made him the final authority on religion and also limited the power of the scholarly class. Akbar the Great was a bit controversial when it came to religion. A lot of people, including liberals, secularists, and non-Muslims, really like him because he instituted a lot of pro-Hindu policies. For instance, several notable Hindus worked in Akbar's administration, such as Raja Todar Mal, finance minister; Raja Barmal, father-in-law and highest-ranking general; Raja Bhagwan Das, brother-in-law, general, and member of the court; and Raja Mana Singh, high-ranking general and member of the court. Akbar even made sure that Hindus made up half of his military forces. He also banned the practice of sati, where a widow was expected to jump on the burning corpse of her husband and be cremated alive. But a lot of conservative Muslims really hated Akbar. They didn't like that he adopted policies that weren't in line with Islam and that he seemed more concerned with pleasing non-Muslims than Muslims. The following excerpt comes from an article entitled Sulh-i-Kul and the Religious Ideas of Akbar, written by M. Athar Ali and M. Akhtar Ali for the 1980 proceedings of the Indian History Congress. This passage shows Akbar's overall religious ideology. On reading the Akbarnama and the Ain-i-Akbar, one realizes immediately that Akbar wished to assert his very strong belief in God, but his concept of the way God is to be worshipped was independent of either Orthodox Islam or Hinduism. As the happy saying set out in the Ain show, he believed, as did the Sufis, that God is to be grasped and worshipped by different men according to the limitations of their knowledge. God was formless and could not be grasped in any form except by the greatest effort of the mind. To worship such a one, physical action and prayer was suitable only for the unawakened ones. Otherwise, worship could only be an act of the heart. Elsewhere, Akbar is said to have held that the real act of worship is to have an illuminated heart that loves light. Akbar, therefore, deprecated both the image worship of the Hindus and the prayer ritual of the Muslims. His deprecation of image worship is particularly borne upon us when the author of the Akbarnama styles Todar Mal a simple one, because he mourned the loss of the idols he used to worship. It goes on to call him a blind follower of custom and narrow-mindedness. For the benefit of this celebrated minister, Akbar also sermonized to the effect that no worship of God is superior to looking after the weak. Unquote. This shows us that, from an Islamic perspective, Akbar had a very unorthodox view of Allah. He even went so far as to create his own religion. Let's talk about that. By the early 1580s, Akbar has started having doubts about Islam. He stopped sending money to Mecca and Medina, and he ceased his annual pilgrimage to Ajmer and Rajasthan, which we discussed in the previous episode. He began learning about other religions and invited scholars from different faiths, like Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, and Jews to the Ibadat Khana. The first Portuguese Jesuits also visited him in 1580 after he met them during the Gujarat campaign, also discussed in the previous episode. More Jesuits came to visit him later, including Rodolfo Acquaviva, Antonia Montserrat, and Francis Henriquez, who was a Persian convert to Christianity and acted as a translator. Akbar referred to them as Nazarene sages and was very fond of them, often inviting them to sit next to him and giving them food from the royal table. He even allowed them to build an altar in his palace, appointed them as tutors for his son, and allowed them to perform conversions. However, after some time, the priest started taking too many liberties and insulting the Muslim scholars in the capital, as well as insulting Islam itself. Akbar eventually ordered them to stop. There is a portrait in the Akbarnama, that's the official Mughal biography of Akbar, showing him in discussion with a couple of Jesuit priests. The scene takes place outside, apparently in a palace courtyard. A full moon glows in the distance against the night sky. Akbar is the center of attention, and he sits cross-legged and barefoot on a covered couch. He's wearing a yellow robe with an orange turban. Akbar does not have a beard in this picture, and this will make sense later on. To his left are several servants. One of the servants stands slightly behind Akbar, fanning him. Two young boys stand just to the side, waiting in attendance. Gathered before Akbar are several Muslim scholars. Most of them are holding books, presumably about different aspects of Islamic theology. At first glance, these books appear to be copies of the Quran, but since some of them are laying on the ground, this is unlikely. All but one of the Muslim scholars have full beards. In the middle of the gathering is what appears to be a larger book on a platform with a scroll of paper. This is most likely the Quran. To Akbar's right are two Jesuit priests, one of them holding an open Bible. Both priests are dressed in black. Since everyone else in the picture is wearing brightly covered clothing, these priests make a striking contrast. Sitting between the Jesuits and Akbar are two non-European men. Both have handlebar mustaches, but no beards. Most likely, they are not Muslim. One of these men, obviously a translator, is talking to Akbar. This picture gives us an interesting view of Akbar that goes beyond the image of a ruthless warrior and conqueror. After a few years of having open discussions with scholars of different religions, Akbar tried to solve all religious conflict by announcing a new religion called Din-i-Ilahi, which means the religion of God. It was supposed to be a mixture of all religions, and because of this, it was hated by all religions and gained very few followers. Akbar is quoted as saying the following, quote, "We ought to bring the different religions of India into one, but in such a fashion that they be one and all, with the greatest advantage of taking what is good in every creed and discarding the remainder. In this way, honor will be done to God, peace and prosperity will be restored to the people, and security to the empire." Unquote. This new religion died out with Akbar. Some people say that it was vaguely based around worshiping the emperor, although Akbar's supporters deny this accusation. I'll let you come to your own conclusion. John F. Richards provides a description of this new religion in his book, The Mughal Empire. Quote, Drawing upon the newly articulated imperial idiom, Akbar and his advisors devised an esoteric means to bind leading nobles to him. In part, this appeal emerged naturally from Akbar's own intense spiritual quest that found its fullest expression at Fatehpur Sikri. In the early 1580s, the emperor began openly to worship the sun by a set of rituals of his own invention. 4 times a day, he faced the east and prostrated himself before a sacred fire. Simultaneously, Akbar engaged in abstinence from excessive meat eating, sexual intercourse, and alcohol consumption. These were all rites and practices much in evidence in the daily world of Hinduism in North India. Worship of the sun and moon with its images of light was easily compatible with the myths of origin and descent central to the ethos of his Rajput nobles. Shortly thereafter, the emperor began to enlist selected members of the nobility as his disciples in association with the worship of sun and light. At noon on Sundays before the sacred fire, the emperor presided over an initiation ceremony. Groups of 12 neophytes entered the body of disciples on these occasions. Each initiate swore to accept 4 degrees of devotion to Akbar, the unhesitating willingness to sacrifice one's life, Jan, property, mal, religion, deen, and honor, namus, in the service of the master, that is, Akbar. Muslim initiates signed a declaration agreeing to repudiate the bonds of Orthodox Islam and to worship Allah directly, without intermediaries. Throughout the ceremony, the neophyte placed his head on Akbar's feet in an extreme form of prostration known as sajda. At the close of the ceremony, Akbar raised up each supplicant, placed a new turban upon his head, and gave him a symbolic representation of the sun embossed on a medallion. Each new disciple also received a tiny portrait of Akbar to wear upon his turban, as well as a set of pearl earrings crafted for the occasion. Unquote. The greeting in this new faith was, get this, Allahu Akbar. Now we know this is a common phrase used by Muslims all over the world. However, if it is pronounced in a certain way, it could mean, wa na'udhu billah, Akbar is God in Urdu. After establishing his new religion, it seemed like Akbar started turning against Islam. He kept pigs in the palace. He banned the consumption of beef. He discouraged men from wearing beards. In fact, most pictures of Akbar show him without a beard. Now, I told you this would make sense later on. He prohibited circumcision before the age of 12. He abolished the Adhan and public prayers. He discouraged or discontinued Hajj and fasting. And he even changed Muslim names to Indian names. Now, let's be clear. Most of these rules were never fully enforced. Most historians believe Akbar only passed them to please his Hindu wives and relatives. It seems like Akbar cared more about maintaining his political alliances than about upholding Islamic purity. The Jesuits eventually gave up trying to convert Akbar to Christianity, but they wrote extensively about him and his court later in life. When Akbar asked them to send more priests, they agreed. These new priests also kept trying to convert Akbar and his family. In 1610, during Jahangir's reign, some of Akbar's grandsons were even baptized. However, the priests later realized that their main purpose was to get close to Christian women. The Jesuits later admitted that these Mughal princes returned to Islam. Meanwhile, there was growing resistance among the Muslims to Akbar's behavior, and several Islamic scholars in the empire declared him a murtad, apostate, and called for the people to rise up against this impious ruler. The Bengal Revolts. It wasn't long before some groups decided to act on the call to revolt against Akbar. The first group to do so were the Chagatais of Bengal in 1582. These were Akbar's own people, led by a man named Baba Khan Kashgal. Akbar sent Raja Todar Mal and Aziz Koka to suppress the revolt, which they eventually did. However, a lot of Muslims were still unhappy and called on Akbar's brother, Mirza Hakim, the ruler of Kabul, to revolt against him. In 1581, Mirza Hakim invaded Punjab, but Akbar defeated him and chased him all the way back to Kabul. Akbar could have taken Kabul if he wanted to, but he decided to show mercy to his brother and allowed him to retain control of the city. When Mirza Hakim died in 1585, Akbar annexed all of Kabul. Also in 1581, a Bengali Muslim chieftain named Isa Khan declared himself the ruler of southern Bengal and began expanding and fortifying his territory. He was supported by 12 Bengali chieftains who had previously been governors in Bengal before it was annexed by the Mughals. Isa Khan used the Chagatai revolt in 1582 to expand even further and establish his capital at Kachrabo in modern central Bangladesh. Ralph Fitch was a British explorer and merchant who traveled to India, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East in the late 16th century. He is one of the first Englishmen to visit India and write about his experiences there. Here's a quote from Ralph Fitch describing the rebellion in Bengal. Quote, "They be all hereabouts rebels against the king Jalaluddin Akbar, for here are so many rivers and islands that they flee from one to another, whereby his horsemen cannot prevail against them. The chief king of these countries is Isa Khan, and he is the chief of all the other kings, and is a great friend to all Christians." Unquote. The other kings Fitch mentioned were likely the 12 chieftains that supported Isa Khan. In Bengali, they are referred to as the Barabuyan. In September 1584, Isa Khan defeated the Mughals in a naval battle which allowed him to rule the eastern Ganges Delta region for the next 15 years. In 1594, Akbar appointed Raja Man Singh as the governor of Bengal and established his capital at Rajmahal on the Ganges Delta. However, in August 1597, Isa Khan joined forces with a Mughal rebel named Masum Khan Kabuli and defeated the Mughals in another naval battle. Raja Man Singh's son was killed in the fighting. Isa Khan died in 1599, but the Bengal resistance continued well into Jahangir's reign. Kashmir and the Deccan. Kashmir is a region in northern India and eastern Pakistan. Situated in the Himalayan mountain range, it is bordered by India, Pakistan, and China. Kashmir is known for its natural beauty and has a long history of human habitation. The region has been fought over by various empires and dynasties throughout history, and it has always been a center of cultural exchange due to its location on the Silk Road. Kashmir has a varied topography, with the western part being dominated by the Karakoram and the eastern part by the Himalayas. The landscape of Kashmir includes mountains, valleys, lakes, and rivers. The Kashmir region has a cold and dry climate, with temperatures ranging from very cold in the winter to warm in the summer. The main rivers in Kashmir are the Jhelum, the Chenab, and the Indus. Kashmir is also home to several lakes, including the Dal Lake and the Wular Lake. Kashmir is predominantly Muslim, but it also has a significant Hindu population. In modern times, the region has been the subject of a dispute between India and Pakistan, with both countries claiming sovereignty over it. The conflict has resulted in violence and human rights abuses, and it remains a contentious issue to this day. Akbar, always looking to expand his empire, sent 2 armies into Kashmir in 1586. The first army was led by Raja Bhagwan Das, who ended up signing a peace treaty with the ruler of Kashmir, Yusuf Shah. However, Akbar wasn't satisfied with this outcome, so he sent another army which forced Yusuf Shah to surrender. Yusuf Shah and his son became members of the imperial court. Akbar himself visited Kashmir in 1589, and it became the summer capital for the Mughals. The Deccan Campaign. The Deccan is a region in southern India that is surrounded by the Western Ghats to the west and the Eastern Ghats to the east. It has a dry, hot climate with cool winters and is known for its fertile black soil that is suitable for growing crops like rice, wheat, and millet. The Deccan has a rich history and was home to several ancient empires and kingdoms such as the Maurya Empire, the Satavahana dynasty, the Chalukya dynasty, and of course, the Deccan Sultanates. It is culturally diverse with a variety of languages like Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, and Marathi. The Deccan has always been an important center of trade and commerce because of its location on the Indian subcontinent. In the early 1590s, Akbar turned his attention south and sent emissaries to the 4 Deccan sultanates demanding they acknowledge his supremacy. The Deccan sultans avoided giving a direct answer for as long as possible. However, in 1595, Ibrahim Nizam Shah, sultan of the Nizam Shahi dynasty and ruler of the Ahmadnagar Sultanate, died in battle. This caused a disagreement among the nobles about who should be his successor. The South Indian nobles preferred the Sultan's 12-year-old son, Shah Tahir. This faction was led by a noble named Mian Manju. On the other hand, the Habashi, or African descent nobles, wanted the Sultan's infant son, Bahadur Shah, to be the next ruler, with his aunt, Chand Bibi, acting as his regent. This faction was led by a noble named Ikhlas Khan. Mian Manju asked the Mughals to support his cause, and Akbar's son, Murad Mirza, arrived in the Deccan with a large force. He was accompanied by the Mughal commander Kani Kanan Abdurrahim. The Mughals laid siege to the Ahmadnagar fortress, and Chand Bibi led the defense of Ahmadnagar. She was seen fighting with a sword in hand and a veil covering her face. Eventually, the Mughals made an agreement with Chand Bibi. They recognized Bahadur Shah, the infant son, as the Sultan, with Chand Bibi acting as his regent until he came of age. The Mughals' subpar performance was blamed on the prince, Murad Mirza, who was often intoxicated during the campaign. By 1599, Murad was doing so poorly that Akbar sent another commander named Abul Fadl to help him. A few days after Abul Fadl arrived, Murad died of alcohol poisoning. After Chand Bibi died in 1600, Akbar led an army into the Deccan himself and occupied Ahmadnagar. He also annexed the kingdom of Khandesh after a brutal siege, which was just north of Ahmadnagar. With Chand Bibi gone, Malik Ambar and Raja Deccani led the resistance against the Mughals. If you haven't yet, I strongly encourage you go listen to our 3-part series on Malik Ambar from late 2022. This will give you a more detailed look into this period of history. Brothers and sisters, this will conclude Season 8 of the Islamic History Podcast. Inshallah, we will return later this year with Season 9 and continue our discussion of the Mughal Empire.